This is Why Am I a Mets Fan? A podcast hosted by Samantha Croston and Ashley Wenskoski.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Why Am I a Mets Fan podcast. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston, and we are two Syracuse sports reporters with a baseball podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. Just want to say right in the beginning of the episode, you guys are great with the liking, with the commenting. Please continue to subscribe. Really helps us out when you do that. Hi, Ashley. How are you feeling?
Hello. Spring training rages on. We fight on. About a month till baseball. Doesn't necessarily feel like it up here, but it is March. We've entered the month where baseball will be played. That's a good feeling.
It's a great feeling.
Opening day, like 3.5 weeks away. I don't know. It still feels so elusive. We're kind of in the slog of spring training right now where you're seeing some of this stuff. You're excited, but you're like, it's spring training, so I don't know if I can get excited. We're almost there, folks.
The slog.
The slog.
Elusive. Nice.
Thanks.
I totally agree. Nice word choices there. We're here to talk about a lot of different things today, but of course we want to start with the most recent thing, which is that the Brewers signed Jose Quintana. That was someone who we talked about a lot in recent episodes. Would that be somebody who is back with the Mets? And the answer to that question is a fat effing no.
Yeah, Quintana will not be returning to New York after he played the last 2 seasons with the Mets. John Heyman reported today that the Brewers are signing him to a 1-year deal. No word on the money yet. The club hasn't confirmed it yet, so a little early in that process, but he won't be coming back to Queens. Obviously, as we know, his name, one that had been thrown out, right, with the Mets losing 2 out of their 5, maybe 6 starters for opening day in Montas and Minaya, have been shut down with injury with varying timelines. So, Quintana's out of the equation. I think, we sat here last week and the week before and said that maybe he was someone that we were intrigued to see back, but he will not be back. He goes back to the NL Central, which is a place that he spent a large majority of his career. I mean, he's played for the Cubs, the Pirates, the Cardinals, now the Brewers. He's got the whole NL Central under his belt.
Yep. Quintana, 36, spent the last 2 seasons in Flushing. And yes, we did talk about him as an option for a variety of reasons, but just to go through some of the bullets. He pitched a 3.75 ERA in 170 and a third innings across 31 regular season starts last season with 135 strikeouts. He had a 3.57 ERA in 13 starts during the 2023 season. He made 3 playoff starts for the Mets last season, which I think were memorable for fans, allowing 0 earned runs across his first 2 appearances, which resulted in Mets victories in Game 3 of the wild card round and Game 4 of the NLTS, although he did falter in Game 4 of the NLCS against the Dodgers. It was the Dodgers, but you know how it is. But the point is, he's not going to be with the Mets anymore. It was something we thought could be an option, but honestly, I think that was one of the topics that a lot of Mets Twitter and even, people who are also in the Mets media were sort of split on, whether that would be a good decision or not.
I think the price point was probably too expensive, right? We were even throwing it around. The minute you sign Quintana to an $8 million, $10 million a year deal with the Cohen luxury tax that the Mets are dealing with, that becomes more like $21 million. So they didn't think it was worth it monetarily. I mean, I thought he'd be a nice piece to have back, money aside, just he gives you that veteran presence. You know what you're getting. He's consistent enough. He'll have a few meltdowns, few midsummer meltdowns. I always say that, by the way, because my
MSM.
an MSM, midsummer meltdown. Now we have a new phrase to add to the repertoire. I always talk about his meltdowns because my lone game at Citi Field last year was a Quintana meltdown. He gave up 8 runs or something in August, so that's burned into my brain. But he pitched well in the postseason. Other than that NLCS debacle, and I think he's you know what you're getting from him relatively every 5 days, which I don't think can be said for some of the gaggle and some of the other options in this rotation.
Speaking of phrases, the gaggle. I love an MSM. If I'm gonna have a mid-episode meltdown from now on, I'm just gonna be like, there's a mem alert.
When I start crying laughing, that's mid-episode meltdown.
That's a mem.
Right. Anyways, so no Montas, no Minaya. We know that. We know that Minaya could be back in mid to late April. To me, wanting Quintana back was less about the actual stats he's going to give you. It's more about throwing out a proven guy every 5 days. You know what he's going to give you. You know he's going to get the job done most of the time. And he doesn't have the question marks that a lot of the rest of this rotation has, right? Now, immediately, we have no Montas, no Minaya, question marks injury-wise there. Kodai Senga's a mystery after last year. David Peterson, don't know if he's going to replicate it. And also, by the way, is coming off of the most innings he's ever pitched in his career, as is Sean Manaea. 2 guys in that rotation had the most innings thrown that they ever have last year. The layoff from that is usually not positive. And then you have the gaggle, and you have Griffin Canning, not Griffin Canning, you have Clay Holmes, who is trying to become a starter. So it's a lot of question marks, and to me, Quintana was not a question mark.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the gaggle's going to gaggle.
Right.
The gaggle's going to giggle. I don't know what the gaggle's going to do.
I don't know if they're
But
going to giggle.
honestly, in David Peterson, I trust.
I agree.
I do.
Peterson, we were high on Peterson last year.
I am still high on Peterson.
Yeah.
I am a Peterson lover and a truster. I don't know. We'll see if that leads me in a right direction or I end up on a meme like a couple months from now. But I really feel confident in him, and I'm going to stick to that until I have a reason to not be. Just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think the one thing I will say on this topic, and then we can move on, is, at end of the day, I think that the Mets could have signed him and obviously made a choice not to. This was like a whole lengthy ordeal. They ultimately did not sign him. And what I will say is, I think that everything that the Mets organization does now, the decision makers, there is a reason for.
I agree.
And that is also something that I'm going to trust until I have a reason not to. I, like you, was in the camp that having Quintana wouldn't have been a bad move, especially seeing what we saw. But, and seeing the fact that there are current starting pitchers who now won't be available on opening day. But that being said, if they had a certain plan in the chess game that they continue to play, then I believe there was a reason for that. And I think the reason actually might be more apparent even now than we thought, which we'll get into later in the episode. Anyway, before we get into that, just wanted to also say that the Mets actually signed a different Jose. Maybe that's something you could bring us through.
Yes. So, yes, I agree with what you were saying, by the way, about...
You know what I mean?
Right. The Mets under David Stearns and Steve Cohen, we've talked about it, have not been reactionary. Is signing a starting pitcher with the Montas and Manaea stuff reactionary? Maybe, when you have all this starting pitching depth that you accumulated, but it's unproven starting pitching depth. So that's where I falter a little bit. But they're not reactionary, and they weren't with Quintana. I think he fell in the realm of Severino, Iglesias, unfortunately, that David Stearns and Steve Cohen looked at after last season and didn't think that they were must-bring-back pieces.
Right. The only thing I guess that surprises me is, like, yes, it would have been reactionary, but I also feel like the reaction would have been warranted.
I agree.
Considering what happened.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of Mets media and media in general is quick to say that in baseball. Like, you just never want to make a reactionary move that's too rash.
But
like,
maybe
if
we
the
need to
situation
react.
called for it, it's okay to be reactionary when you need to react.
Right,
like, that can't always be a negative word.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
No, I
someone
agree.
like, puts a gun to my face, I'm going to react in a certain way. Like, there needs to be reaction to whatever is going on. Not saying that's what happened here.
Sometimes the reaction's warranted. Sometimes.
But I'm saying in this situation, I think it would have made sense. I'm okay with
I
the fact
agree.
that they didn't, though. It's
He was a
okay.
little too expensive. David Stearns was out with his little change purse.
It was
he's been toting
fight
around
or
this
flight,
offseason.
and they flew away.
Yeah. Anyways, last week the Mets agreed to. This happened right after our episode last week. So it's a little older at this point. Midweek last week they signed right-hander Jose Urena on a minor league contract. He's a 10-year veteran. He pitched for the Rangers last year in more of a swingman role. Had a 3.8 ERA. That ERA is a little misleading because he had 2 like clunkers at the end of the season that inflated that. So actually pitched a little bit better throughout the course of last season than that 3.8 ERA. Big off-speed guy. Really relies on his sinker, his slider, but also can really throw heat with the fastball. I think it's a good signing. I mean, it's a minor league deal, so maybe he starts in AAA Syracuse. I think he's a guy that can eat innings for the Mets. He's another depth piece that I don't think you're going to look at and be like, yeah, that's our third starter. But he's a guy that can come in there, make some swing starts, give you some long relief out of the bullpen. You know who it's giving to me, who was a failed experiment last year, but who is back for this year, is Huascar Brazoban. I'm having visions of Brazoban.
Oh, that is not tantalizing.
No. I hope it turns out better. It seems like the Brazoban objective, though.
Yes.
You know?
No, I know. No, it's like just funny. Like, I feel like I feel like I have an analogy vision once per episode at this point, but I just feel like every time we get on here, there's somebody who we're talking about that we're just not all that excited about.
Yeah, like it's like they signed Urena. That's nice.
Yeah,
Sorry.
like you know when like it's giving to me like this analogy of when you're getting to a party and they're like, oh yeah, like we have all the snacks, but you look at the snacks and
You
it's
don't
like
want any of the
some
snacks.
vegetables and hummus. I'm like, where is the freaking Frito?
Yeah.
Like,
Does anybody have a chip?
does anybody have a nice crunchy,
Right.
ridged chip?
Because I didn't come to the party to eat a veggie platter. Like if I'm at a party, like I've already like made the things with myself that I'm not eating vegetables.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Stop bringing the veggie platter to the party because really nobody wants it.
Yeah.
It's honestly just for show. And
Right.
it's also pretty lazy.
Right.
Like if you're going to go in and you're going to bring some kind of an app, maybe try.
Yeah, a little. Yeah.
Okay.
So they signed Urena. But this all brings me to my broader point of this rotation before we wrap up the talk on the rotation is that I have a new theory because I'm choosing optimism because it's too early in the spring to not choose optimism, which is not usually the road that I travel down, but I'm taking the road less traveled tonight.
Everybody mark this down in your calendars. This is road never traveled.
March 3rd, 2025.
Everybody on the road is like, who's this girl?
Right. Road less traveled down, it's only me on the road. Driving my convertible in Syracuse in the snow. Anyway.
Yep.
I think the Mets maybe are not making some of these starter moves that we're looking for them to make because you got Brandon Sproat and you got Blade Tidwell knocking on the door. I know we touched on Sproat a little bit last week. We said that the preferable option is for him to start the year in AAA. I stand by that. I would like to see him have a little more success in AAA Syracuse in April and May and maybe a little bit into June before he maybe gets a midsummer call-up and has no midsummer meltdowns. But
An MSC.
Right, midsummer call.
I'm done. So sorry.
Maybe David Stearns knows that both of these guys are gonna fit into this rotation mid to end of the year. So at that point, how many pitchers can you add? Now that's really not, you can't rely on that, but Stearns might have a vision, and I think he really might. This was also on my mind this week because Blade Tidwell threw an immaculate inning on Saturday. That's 9 pitches, 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts. It was his first spring training start. It was very impressive. He pitched 2 innings. 18 of his 19 pitches were strikes. He's one of their top prospects. We saw him a little bit in AAA Syracuse last year. Got called up mid-year, made some starts. He was their second-round pick out of Tennessee in 2022. But this was against major league hitters. It was not a spring training where he was out here, facing the nobodies. It was against the Rays, by the way. Shout out to our commenter, Elephant, who's a Rays fan, by the way. You've been here since the beginning, and you're a Rays fan, and I know you, and I see you. So it was against your Rays, and it was against major league hitters. I mean, it was against Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lowe, a power hitter. Obviously, Diaz, batting champ a couple years ago. These were big-time guys that Tidwell mowed down. His stuff looked great.
Not to mention, Brandon Sproat also made his spring debut Friday and sat down all 6 Nationals batters he faced while maxing out at 99 miles per hour. Yes, to your point, I definitely think that this is a part of Stearns' vision. And I'm not mad about it. Like, I like this route, and I always have the idea of, you develop these players, now you want to see what you're able to make of them. We'll see. I haven't seen enough yet to feel super excited, and I haven't seen enough yet to feel disappointed or nervous. Like, end of the day, it is spring training, and I need to see when it really comes down to it and there's pressure on the line, who's able to perform. And really, you won't know that until you know that, which is why, like you said, I would not mind seeing some AAA reps first to avoid a meltdown. Now we have to make reactionary moves.
Right. And we will be hot on the press here in Syracuse if both Tidwell and Sproat start the year here, which in my opinion, they're both going to. But I'm just saying they could be helpful come the summer. Maybe you hit a few more injuries, some depth pieces. I mean, I think, first of all, that I saw this point, and I think it's very true, that something that has kind of evaded Steve Cohen's Mets so far, for all the praise that we've given them and the big signings and the NLCS run, is kind of that, Mets homegrown, young, dominant rotation of old. Steve Cohen has not found his version of Matt Harvey and Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard and all them yet. And forget about that. That was, obviously recent on our minds, but the Mets as a franchise historically have had pitching dominance. I mean, you think back to Tom Seaver and Doc Gooden and Jerry Koosman and that whole era. The Mets are known for their pitching, and they're young, homegrown, developing these pitchers and then having these dominant rotations. That's not something that Steve Cohen has figured out yet. Could he be on the way with Sproat and Tidwell? Maybe.
And we're gonna see about that, honestly, and you have it here. Like, Tidwell was a guy who in AAA struggled immensely
as
last
did
year.
Sproat, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, For Tidwell, it says 5.93 ERA at AAA. He also, I guess, had gone on record and said that he believed that his repertoire was too deep. There were a lot of different pitches thrown in there. He had a 9-pitch arsenal last year. He has since sort of simmered that down. There's less pitches now. And let me see. I think you put what he has. He boiled it down to a 4-seamer, 2-seamer, slider, changeup, and sweeper, which I feel is plenty.
Sometimes less is more. You know what I mean?
Totally. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And obviously he needed to make a change. I think that is smart considering what he was working with before. But that's why, like I said, we'll see. I'm sort of the last one to be convinced in some of these situations, just because I do feel like people don't always, we see a guy like Mark Vientos, and it makes that transition from AAA to the major leagues seem so easy and seamless.
Right.
But not everybody actually has that kind of a transition, as proven by Brett Beatty, among others. Sometimes guys need more time, and that's not me trying to be a negative Nelly. I just have to see a little bit more before I feel convinced that all of this is going to work out in a good way.
I agree, and I think pitchers especially, right? Changing your development and adjusting to facing major league hitters, but even AAA hitters. It's a big adjustment from a guy who was in college 2 years ago.
And a big difference. It is really a big difference in the talent level. Yeah. So I know that all of our viewers know that, but let's, I guess, see what happens. But it was cool. It was very cool. It was a good start. It was impressive. I love to see it. So we'll see. We'll see. No Quintana, and we'll see what else they're able to do.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Earlier this spring, Mets officials broadly discussed the idea of naming a captain. Also makes me think, let's actually make that our question of the week. I would love to hear from you guys just about all of what's going on right now. Do you think it was the right move to not sign Quintana and to do what they're doing now? Are you excited about what you saw? Are you nervous? Let us know.
How do you feel about Sproat and Tidwell?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much
for coming.
You're always invited. All right, yes. So now moving on, earlier this spring, Mets officials broadly discussed this idea of naming a captain. This was reported by friend of the program, Anthony DiComo.
Friend of the program.
Truly a friend. He's an awesome guy. He's a great reporter, and he's been on this podcast before, actually. This was months ago, but if you want to check out that episode, feel free. Ashley puts here, Lindor a no-brainer for that role? Not so fast. And why do you say that?
Well, that was the point of the article. Very good stuff from Anthony DiComo, reporting something that I think was widely known and talked about in the Mets sphere, that, it seems a little obvious that Lindor would be your pick. But his whole point of this article was, well, maybe that's not the case. Quote from the article was, earlier this spring, according to a person with knowledge of the conversation, Mets officials broadly discussed the idea of naming a captain for the first time since David Wright retired 7 years ago. They decided to table the conversation for now because while Lindor may be the obvious vocal candidate, Brandon Nimmo is the longest tenured Met who has played a huge role in team affairs. And this article really focused on basically how can you name Lindor a captain without Nimmo. It also touched on, obviously now you got Juan Soto who's going to be here for 12 years. Alonso probably is going to see the door in the next few years, but he's been around for a while. Sean Manaea really was vocal last year. So there's a lot of voices in the room, but it really boiled it down to Lindor and Nimmo, who are both under contract, Nimmo through 2030, Lindor through 2031, I should add. And the article said when things went wrong for the Mets last year, both helped lead the renaissance. Then it had quotes. This is true, So Nimmo said it's supposed to be one person, but from what I've seen and how our team responded last year, I saw many different people step up and lead. And I think that just slapping the C on one guy would probably not be a full picture of what's actually been going on here. He went on to say, man, it would be tough to slap a C on my chest without slapping a C on Lindor's chest. Lindor, when asked about it, said, I do feel like I'm one of the leaders of the team. If it does happen, it would be an honor, it'd be a privilege, it'd be something I'd never take for granted. What do you think about all this?
I mean, end of the day, because I see she also has written here, which many of you, the Mets fans especially, will know this, despite the fact that the Mets have named only 4 captains in their 63-year history, they are one of several teams to have employed co-captains.
Yeah.
What do I think? I think that, let's start with their quotes. I think that Lindor truly does feel that if there's going to be one captain, it should be him. And I think most people agree with that, including Nimmo, which is why when Nimmo was asked, he said it would be hard for you to put a C on my chest without putting one on Lindor's. I think Nimmo knows that he'd probably be that number 2 option. But how would I feel about them being co-captains? I don't just like it. I love it.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's perfect. I think for this team, what Nimmo said makes sense. I don't think that when times have been tough, they have relied on one team. It is absolutely true that Lindor is the vocal leader, but that doesn't always mean that because you're the vocal leader, you're the best one. I, too, felt like I was always a vocal leader in some of the positions I've been in, but I also think that you need that person who leads by example, and that's what makes me think about Nimmo. It's time for me to make a good point right now. My alarm just went off. No, I honestly really do. I really believe that, Nimmo is that guy who's more of like a silent assassin. He's not saying so many words, but when he does, people listen.
Yeah.
It's just a totally different kind of leader, but one that is needed. And obviously, they're both people who have been here for a while. You mentioned the Soto thing. Honestly, I know people don't agree with me on this. I think a lot of people don't believe me or believe that this is true, but I truly don't think that Juan Soto came here because he wanted to just be the guy. I really believe that he came to the Mets because he saw that it was a team that was made up of the group, and that's what makes it so great. It's not just one individual. I don't think he would care. I don't think he would expect it, and I don't think he should be the captain.
And not right now, right? Because you also have to think about the fact that if Soto doesn't utilize those opt-outs, he's here for 12 years, Lindor and Nimmo under contract for the next 5 or 6. We'll see what happens after that. But maybe there's a world where Juan Soto, when he's 35, is the captain because he's been a Met for life at that point. I don't know. That's in 10 years. I agree with you. I love the co-captains idea. The former ones in Mets history were Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter, obviously in the 80s, which our older viewers will know about. I think that would be appropriate. I'm not going to lie, though. Whenever we had these discussions about the captaincy, throwing it around, and we always said we wanted it to be Lindor, and everybody wants it to be Lindor, Nimmo never even really crossed my mind. Then I read this article and I was like, well, there are points here, right? Nimmo's a homegrown Met. They drafted him out of high school in Wyoming. He's been here the whole time. He signed his long-term contract here. I think guys do look to Nimmo for leadership on the Mets. I think he definitely is that. It's like that 1A, 1B thing, right? When the Mets lose a game and everything's awful, last April, Lindor's standing at his locker answering questions that he doesn't want to answer, and so is Nimmo. He's definitely always right there beside him. So yeah, now that I read all that and kind of took that in, I'm like, maybe Lindor, a guy who isn't homegrown, who didn't start his career here, maybe that would be inappropriate to just give him the captain.
If it needs to be one guy, then I think it should be Lindor.
Well, I agree.
That's it.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't have to be one guy, it almost makes it feel like it's another one of those things that isn't the traditional way of doing things, which makes it perfect for the Mets organization.
I agree. I think it'd be beautiful to see them, both Nimmo and Lindor, running out there with a C. That would make me very happy.
It really would.
For all of our viewers who I know, by the way, because we always, whenever we talk about the captain thing, get people in the comments being like, what is it about? Is it a New York thing, the captain thing? Honestly, I don't know, and I would love to know, right? The only other captains right now in baseball are Aaron Judge of the Yankees, and the Royals, I think, named Salvador Perez their captain, which is just, I don't know what goes on in Kansas City. But yeah, it does seem like a New York traditional thing, right? The Mets have had a few captains throughout their history. The Yankees obviously have. I don't know. Is it utilized way more in New York than other places because the media scrutiny is so tough? You always want to have that one guy who you know is going to stand at his locker? I don't know. To me, and David Wright was the only captain that we've known in our lifetimes for the Mets, it was so apparent at that time because he was the guy, right? Nobody else embodied the franchise in the way that David Wright did. Nobody else stood at their locker and answered all the questions when they lost like David Wright did. Now, I agree. There's a couple candidates.
And also, I just think if you even look at other sports and other teams across all levels, not just professional, there is normally more than one captain on the team. Like baseball is just sort of that weird, unique example. But a lot of times, the team makeup is not one guy who's the guy or one girl who's the girl. I do really think on a lot of great teams, it's people who share the leadership roles, who share the ownership and share the accountability. If you have people who have that kind of makeup, and I really believe that both Nimmo and Lindor do, then I almost feel like you'd be doing yourself a disservice to not have them both sharing that role.
Totally.
Not to mention, it makes them able to, once you're a captain, you're sort of on a different playing field. I really do feel that way.
Yeah.
And there's more that you need to be held accountable for. Why not have a buddy in that situation where you can bounce ideas off of them and feel like not everyone is looking to you all the time? I honestly think it takes the pressure off a little bit. I really do.
I'd love to see it. I hope they do it. We've been on the record saying many a time, I feel like it's time for Lindor. Maybe if it's time for Lindor, it's time for Nimmo too. I don't know what it has to take, but I think with the leadership that's been around and that is signed long term, it would be appropriate for the Mets at this point to have a captain.
All right, what do you guys think? One captain, two captains, or no captains? Let us know.
Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns.
All right, we have some other observations from spring training, starting with Jose Siri. What did you see from him?
Yeah, we haven't talked about him a ton this spring. Kind of one of those more under the radar signings from the Mets this offseason. Came over from the Rays. Again, a lot of Rays talk. But I mean, this is a guy that's going to be playing center field probably most of the season for the Mets. So he's hitting 300 this spring. He has 3 home runs already, 7 RBI. Not going to get too excited about spring stats. We've said that time and time again. I think we know what Jose Siri is, right? From his time on the Rays and his time, I think he's 29. So he's been in the league a little while at this point. He's not going to hit for average. He's not going to move runners around. He's not going to do all that. He's going to leave runners on base. He's going to make you want to die because he's going to strike out in big spots, giving Pete Alonso a little bit, but he's going to hit for somewhat of power, and he's going to give you really good defense out there in center field. I think that's kind of his calling card. So, I mean, I don't hate to see that he's hitting for average in spring training. That would be a bonus, if anything. If Jose Siri came out here and had a big year in a year where the Mets outfield situation, because Marte's kind of been a mess, and Nimmo has been dealing with some stuff. He had like knee soreness today. Hope he's fine with all that, but he had the plantar fasciitis at the end of last season. If Siri had a big year, I think that'd be crucial for the Mets.
Yeah, that would be a game changer, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So player to watch and monitor for sure.
Sure.
You also have Brett Baty, who once again is fighting for this spot, man.
He's fighting for his life.
Honestly, I feel I'm proud of the guy.
Yeah, me too.
And I simultaneously feel badly for him. Like, I just think about his parents and the nerves that must always be there, because he really is one of those guys who has sort of gotten stuck in the middle many a time.
He's in the slog. He's in the slog.
He is the slog. I mean, he is the epitome of stuck in the slog right now.
Brett Baty's been like walking through a swamp like for years, and like he can't quite lift his feet up. Like he gets a few feet forward, but the feet aren't coming up. The mud.
Terrible. That's actually a nightmare. Come to think of it.
Midsummer nightmare.
MSN. We're saying slog a lot, just so you guys know. Like, that's just kind of a new word because one of our anchors here said it the other day. I think maybe to describe this newsroom, and it was so hysterical that we were like, we just have to start
Sometimes
using
our
that from now
TV
on.
station's a slog.
Yeah,
to be honest.
We work in local news.
Anyway.
Like, what do you want? Like, this all looks like walls to you guys, but it's actually not even a real wall.
It's the walls within our walls. You know?
Anyway, why did I even give that?
I don't know.
Anyway, Brett Baty is doing. He really is doing a great job.
Yeah.
He's having a great tryout, but he's still in the tryout phase, and that's what sucks.
Listen, somebody told Brett, or Brett knew himself. I think Brett knows himself at this point, but somebody told old Brett, you go out there, you have the spring of your life, and that's the only way that you're turning this old ship around with the Mets. I've said it. I think he could use a change of scenery. I've seen the experiment. I want out of the experiment. But if he has a spring of his life and he deserves a spot on the major league roster, well, they don't show any signs of trading him. I mean, I'm not going to be like rude to the guy. If he doesn't deserve to start the year in AAA, then yeah, give him a shot at the major league level and see what he can do. He's had less of a shot, right? Vientos just kind of excelled right away. Baty has not had the number of at-bats that Vientos has had. We were spoiled with Vientos. Immediately last year, he just acclimated really quickly, had that starting spot, and then was kind of a star down the stretch in the summer.
Which is also why I feel bad. Like, it sucks when literally you're like, they were really,
I know,
and I'm sure many of you guys know this, but even here, like AAA, like they were very close. Like, these guys are like best friends.
It was like Beatty, Ventos, and Alvarez, and 2 of the 3 left.
And it sucks when like your best friends are living out your dream.
Right,
I mean, it doesn't, and I know he doesn't feel that way. Like, I know he saw that and was happy for them, but it was just sort of a weird situation where for a while there, it really was like Baty and Vientos kind of like fighting for, that spot on the roster, and Vientos ultimately won it. So it's like, okay, Baty sort of, doing the whole thing again, which must feel like pressure. To your point, having the spring of his life, it's a start, but honestly, the tryout is not done yet there for me. It's not done.
No, I
agree. It's really just beginning.
I agree. I think the ideal scenario at this point, right, because I know there's going to be fans out there that say, all right, Baty's gotten a shot, but he hasn't had enough of those major league at-bats to prove it to me. Okay, if you feel that way, what I propose is that we know that they have this middle infield kind of backup conundrum. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Jeff McNeil, who's dead weight, and I could get on a McNeil rant, but in the interest of time, I won't. I will another time. Jeff McNeil's still around for some unknown reason, so he's in the equation for second base and the like. I hate Jeff McNeil in center field and in the outfield, so let's try to not do that. Luis Angel Acuna, who we've spoken about, and then Ronnie Mauricio. I believe it's Mauricio. I always butcher his last name, so sorry. If he ever gets healthy, is going to be up there too. My ideal scenario at this point, right, You're going to have Vientos at third. You're going to have Lindor most of the time at shortstop. Second base is more of that question mark. That McNeil is going to play a lot of second. Acuna maybe gets in there, some spot starts, kind of more your utility guy.
Okay.
Maybe don't give him that everyday role. Mauricio, I think, deserves to start the year at AAA. He's been hurt. He hasn't had the number of AAA at-bats that either Baty or Vientos had. Mauricio, I think, needs a little bit of time, and probably with his injury, deservedly so, right? Needs to get ramped up to seeing big league level pitching again. Start him in AAA. Acuna's more of that utility role, and then, yeah, maybe you give Baty a shot alongside Acuna with some of those second base reps behind McNeil, because I think McNeil sucks and doesn't deserve to be in there as a starter as much as he is at all.
Yeah.
I know shortstop is thrown around in there. I don't even know why, because Lindor is going to play the bulk of the games at shortstop. So I don't even know why. Like, Mendoza gets out there and he's like, yeah, I could see Acuna at shortstop. Like, when? When Lindor takes a day off, which he hates doing?
Like, maybe let's not just throw anything out there. What if anything?
Don't even start. What if anything?
I totally, I agree. That's insane. That's absurd. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But honestly, that's what is sort of killer about the situation. I would love to see a situation where Brett Baty rules and just becomes a second baseman
And wins the
stays
second
there
base spot.
and that's the rest
Well,
of his
wouldn't
life.
that be nice? That would be pleasant for Brett.
That'd be that would be pleasant for Mrs. Baty.
For Mrs. Baty.
And the rest of us who are Mets fans would want him there. But wanting him there and rooting for him is not enough.
I don't know if the Mets... See, this is where I get hung up, and I really started to think about this. McNeil, to me, does not deserve to be your unquestioned everyday second baseman at this point, because he sucks. I'll change my stance on McNeil if he deserves to, but I'm over Jeff McNeil.
The pause there, he sucks.
And then also Acuna, I'm not sold that the Mets see Acuna in an everyday role just yet. Maybe they will. Maybe that's coming down the pipeline, but maybe he's more of that utility guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually was impressed by what I saw from Acuna last year. Like, I actually thought he was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, in the limited reps that he did get, he performed great. And that's been part of Brett Baty's problem. I think the reason why people hold out hope with Baty is because you sort of do get the feeling that if he was out there every day, if a tryout was not even needed and he just felt comfortable in his own skin and his position, I feel like he'd do a better job. But because he has all that pressure on him, and he's sort of always been stuck in the high pressure slog, it's hard to get out of that rut and to have your best performance every night when you feel like every night could be your last. People don't, I think, appreciate the pressure of that enough. What? Girl, what?
Brett Baty is like the quintessential. He hasn't proved yet that he's not a quadruple A player. Like, he's really fallen that category.
I know.
And I was on Jake Brown, hosts the Mets Daily podcast. Great stuff. Like, last week I was on it, and he said that he called Baty a quadruple A player. You'll appreciate this analogy. And then he goes, but there's no quadruple A batteries, and you don't need those for anything. And then somebody in the comments was like, actually, there are quadruple A batteries, but the point remains, you don't know that because you don't need them for anything. And that's Brett Baty thus far.
Oh my God.
Did you know there were quadruple A batteries?
I feel like I did.
I don't think I did.
What does it look like? Do you know?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I didn't even know they existed.
You don't know. How do you know? We don't use them.
Right.
What do we... I'm gonna have to look into that.
Anyways.
But you're right. Wow. I don't know why that like hurt me almost.
That resonated with you. I knew it would.
Yeah, no, it really did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not hoping for that to be his fate.
Right.
I am hoping he is a battery that is used all the time.
Rooting for him in the short term.
Same.
His long term, his expiration date's coming up.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, folks. This is our last little debate of the week. We just had to bring up something.
Dodgers fans, perk up now. I know you have thoughts.
Perk up. This is just something that we saw that we questioned and we wanted to discuss further.
These headphones are driving me nuts. Do they look like they're like falling off my head?
No, not really.
All right. Carry on.
I think you're all right.
Sorry.
No, it's totally fine. All right. So Travis Hunter, who many of you may know if you are football fans.
Won the Heisman.
Colorado. Very well known. Colorado. Told a Florida-based reporter named Al Butler, correct?
Yes.
That he thinks what he does on a football field is harder than what Shohei Ohtani does in baseball. Hunter, yes, Heisman-winning player, but he also plays CB and wide receiver. So that was his whole point, is he plays defense and he plays offense, and he thinks that what he does is harder than what Shohei Ohtani does as a two-way player. And it's definitely a discussion to be had. Or is it?
First of all, yikes. All right, if I'm Travis Hunter and
But that's just Travis Hunter, man.
I know, and that's
He
just
just says all that
Colorado,
stuff.
and that's all of it, right? They just got the quotes and the media grabbing things. But I mean, listen, first of all right, let's start from the top. He just won the Heisman. You can't discount what Travis Hunter did. He had one of the best seasons. I mean, I think his work at corner and receiver has been, nothing short of historic. He's approaching the NFL draft and has said many times that he intends to play both in the NFL and is looking for a team that will allow him to do so. Now, if you look at it on the surface, okay, football's a more physically demanding sport. So yeah, playing both sides of the ball in the NFL is more physically taxing on you than it is in baseball to be a pitcher and a hitter, right? It's not like Otani. I mean, he's out there pitching, but it's not. That's what he's really focused on for that day. It's just more of a unique skill set. I don't think you can compare the two. Also, Hunter hasn't played one game in the NFL yet. So that's where I think people got hung up, because it's like Otani's been performing at this elite level in the top tier of his sport in Major League Baseball for years and years. He's won the MVP in both leagues. You all know it. He's been a Cy Young finalist, hasn't won it yet, but he's been at the top of both of those, pitching and hitting in his sport for now years. Hunter hasn't even made the NFL yet. I get that. I think it's a crazy comp. I think if you're Travis Hunter, first of all, whoever Travis Hunter's agent or media person is probably saw that and was like, oh my God, why would you say that?
But I kind of disagree. Well, I don't know. It depends, right? Like, I feel like in football, it's interesting because the culture is sort of different amongst different teams. Like, you have some guys in football who are so sort of like cookie cutter, very rule following, very like just like for example, like a Josh Allen kind of guy. I feel like. But I also feel like in football, you sort of need some of those like personality players and guys.
Plug.
Yeah, which he is. Like, he's the kind of guy who's going to say things that are going to piss some people off, but are going to make other people love him.
Yeah.
And I do feel like on definitely a lot of teams, he's going to be a fit because of that. I also do I think that he deserved the Heisman this year? You bet. I really did believe he was the best player in football. I thought it was the right call. But I don't think that what he's doing is harder than what Shohei Ohtani is doing at all.
No.
At all.
And he hasn't done it yet.
But
That's the other point.
Even if he did, I still wouldn't think it.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just me being honest. Even if he did, I still wouldn't think it. Football is a more demanding sport, definitely. But that's why they also play it once a week. Like, there's rules in place for that. You know what I mean?
That's a good one too.
Like,
right, baseball's an everyday sport.
Yeah. So there's way more games, but I also feel like my logic for thinking this is actually much simpler than any of that. It really is just because if you ask, I really believe most players in other professional leagues, let's just say it is football or it is hockey or lacrosse or really anything, and you ask them, what do you believe is the hardest thing to do in sports? I honestly think somewhere in between 60 and 80% of people will tell you that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports.
Yeah.
And the statistics prove that. Like, think about how many times the batters strike out versus catching a ball or,
You're
scoring a
considered
touchdown.
good at hitting a baseball if you do it 3 out of 10 times.
I mean, so like that is how you know, like, and it's designed that way.
Yeah.
But that's why, like, to be doing what Shohei Ohtani is doing at such an elite level, not to mention, I also think that pitching and hitting, maybe this is what you just said earlier and I blacked out, but they're such uniquely different skills. Is that what you already said?
Kind of. I was getting there. Yeah.
They're such different skills.
Pitching is a craft. Like, pitching is just a whole nother, you want to talk about how hard hitting a baseball is. Pitching is, a craft and an art form, and
you're an artist.
Extremely difficult.
Say that. You're an artist if you know how to pitch.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing. It's like I almost feel like Shohei Ohtani has mastered two things that are really so uniquely different.
Yeah.
Not to say that defense and offense football is the same thing. That's not me. I'm not trying to simplify it like that. But I do feel like it's more similar. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of similar skills that you need, whether it's just like athleticism or, hand-eye coordination. I really feel like in both is good to have in the positions he's playing, at least, Like, I don't think that it's so dissimilar in the way that pitching and hitting is.
And I would like to add, he's a corner and a receiver, and I'm not taking away from it. I said what he's doing is incredible, and I hope he does it at his incredible level in the NFL. But it's not like he's a quarterback and a corner. That would be uniquely different. A corner and a wide receiver, I recognize it's not the same thing, but you're running similar routes. It's basically you're catching the ball or you're defending the guy catching the ball.
Right.
I know it's not that simple, so don't come at me. But essentially, it's a similar concept. He's not a quarterback. You know what I mean? Whereas Shohei Ohtani, you kind of feel like he is the quarterback in terms of he's on the pitching mound once every 5 days. And then he's also, what he's been able to do at the plate at an MVP level, he won the MVP last year and didn't even touch the mound. Then he goes out there and he steals 50 bases just to prove that he can.
Yep.
Why? I don't know. Just to do it.
If you can, you should.
I don't even think it's an argument. And I think Hunter saying that at this level of his career, approaching the NFL draft, was like silly. Like, come on.
I think he just knew it would spark controversy. And honestly, that's probably why he said it. Or who knows? Maybe not. He's a confident guy. Maybe that was something that he really believes. And I don't think you and I have a baseball podcast. Maybe there are guys on football podcasts who would say something different, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really believe that the only way that you could have that argument and discuss it seriously, as a serious thing, would be, to your point, if it really was, he's a quarterback, but he's also
he plays defense, sure.
Now we're talking about something pretty legit here, especially when you just think about even just some of the quarterbacks and their lack of mobility. Like it does seem like a totally different kind of player.
Right.
So if you're doing both of those things, kind of like, damn,
We'll see. I don't know. Maybe Travis Hunter can back that up for me next NFL season.
Hey, if he proves us wrong, I would love to see it. I think that'd be awesome. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us as always. We appreciate you guys being here, and we will see you back here when the next big thing happens. Thanks for joining us.